Imagine standing right in the heart of the French Quarter, like you're holding a giant, sweating plastic cup.
Oh, it's definitely a hurricane. Or a hand grenade.
Right, a massive, sugary hurricane. And jazz is just blaring from some street corner. There's a bachelorette party screaming to your left, and you are entirely, hopelessly lost in all the sensory chaos.
Which is pretty much the universal first-time experience there.
Totally. I mean, you came to this city to find it soul, right, to see the history. But suddenly all you can see is just this neon blur.
It's overwhelming.
It really is. So welcome to today's Deep Dive on the Travel podcast by ExcursionPass. You know we love acting as your personal on-the-ground scouts. Our whole mission here is to anticipate your doubts, get ahead of all those objections you might have, and really bring you the immersive details with a healthy dose of reality.
Exactly. We want to put you right there on the pavement alongside us, sharing every little detail.
Yeah, we want it to feel like you're literally walking the tour with us right now. Because we want you to be able to decide if an experience is actually worth your time and hard-earned money before you ever even pack your bags. We like to think of ourselves as that, expert couple who has lived it and can joke around about the messy parts.
Because there are always messy parts. And that overwhelming sensory chaos you just described, that is exactly the problem we are tackling today. We're looking at this 105-minute walking tour called Quarter Notes, French Quarter Favorites.
Quarter Notes, I like that name.
Right. And it's also listed sometimes as French Quarter Favorites, New Orleans Landmarks Walking Tour. It's run by a group called The Real New Orleans. And our sources from both ExcursionPass and TripAdvisor suggest this tour is designed to be like the ultimate anchor.
An anchor to keep you from drowning in all that Bourbon Street chaos.
Precisely. It claims to be the definitive shortcut to actually understanding the neighborhood rather than just, surviving it.
Which, honestly, sounds like a pretty bold claim for a walk that's under 2 hours.
Yeah.
But before we pull out the physical map and trace the route, we have to talk about the manifesto this tour company operates under. Because it completely changes the lens of the whole experience.
Oh, the manifesto is fascinating.
It really is. The real. New Orleans describes their philosophy as simple but radical. They say they build their tours for wanderers who seek connection over consumption.
Connection over consumption.
Yeah. They want you to experience a place that is, quote, magnificent, messy, mystical, and sometimes maddening. And they want you to do that by tapping into deep listening and the power of presence.
Now, okay, let's unpack this, because I have to throw a flag on the play right here.
I had a feeling you would highlight that exact phrasing.
I mean, listen, when I finally get time off work and I drop money on a flight to New Orleans, I am absolutely looking to consume.
Bring on the food? Right. I want a massive bowl of jambalaya. I want the sugary beignets covered in powdered sugar. I want the loud music. When a tour company starts talking about the power of presence, it sounds suspiciously like a mindfulness retreat masquerading as a history walk.
Like you're going to be doing yoga in Jackson Square.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is this going to be, too serious for a vacation? It feels a bit like being told to sit and quietly savor a single unseasoned grain of rice when you were starving for an absolute feast.
That reaction makes total sense. I get it. But what's fascinating here is if we look at the psychology of how cities like this operate, that philosophy is actually a survival tactic.
A survival tactic? How so?
Well, in a heavily touristed zone like the French Quarter, mindless consumption is just the default gravity. The entire infrastructure is designed to pull you from souvenir shop to bar to photo op over and over.
Yeah, that is incredibly true. You just sort of float along with the crowd.
Right. But because the Quarter is infamous for that extreme sensory overload, I mean, think about the clashing smells of sweet olive and stale beer, the brutal humidity, the crowds. If you don't intentionally ground yourself, the city just happens to you in a total blur.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you end up treating a 300-year-old neighborhood like it's a theme park. Like you're taking a selfie in front of a gorgeous balcony without having any idea what you're actually looking at.
Precisely. The tour creators are targeting that exact blur. They are using this connection over consumption model as a grounding mechanism. They want to hit the pause button for you.
So they're forcing you to stop and just breathe for a second.
Yeah. By asking you to look closely at the physical space and understand its historical weight, they are essentially calibrating your instrument before you start playing the music. You can still go get that giant hurricane afterward, but now you'll actually know what city you're drinking it in.
Okay, I love that analogy. It's not a meditation retreat, it's a life raft. It's calibrating the instrument. So because this tour asks you to look so closely at the physical pavement, it changes how they navigate the space. The source material says this tour aims to give you a readable structure.
Right, acting as a framework for first-time visitors.
Yeah. So how do they physically map that out? Where do we start?
Well, they start right on the fault line of the city's history. The route kicks off at 702 Decatur Street.
Okay, 702 Decatur. Paint the picture for us.
So this is right on the amphitheater steps leading up to Washington Artillery Park. You are sitting directly between Café du Monde and Landry's, and you're right across the street from Jackson Square.
Wow, okay. So you are immediately sandwiched between two massive defining forces. On one side, you have the Mississippi River, which is, the entire economic reason the city even exists in the first place.
The lifeblood of the city.
Right. And then on the other side, you have the heart of a colonial city just staring right back at you.
And from that exact vantage point, the guides start walking you through the absolute essentials of Jackson Square. The sources list stops like St. Louis Cathedral, the Cabildo, the Presbytère, and the Pontalba buildings.
Okay, let's unpack those landmarks for a second, because if you've never been to New Orleans, those are just proper nouns that sound vaguely French.
Very true.
Like the Cabildo isn't just a pretty Spanish colonial facade. It is the actual room where the Louisiana Purchase was signed in 1803.
Which is wild to think about.
Right, it's the building where the size of the United States literally doubled overnight. And then those Pontalba buildings flanking the square. They are essentially the oldest continuously occupied apartment complexes in the entire country.
Which perfectly illustrates that concept of layers that the tour focuses on so heavily.
Ah, right, the layers.
Yeah, because when most visitors walk through the French Quarter, they naturally assume they are looking at French architecture. I mean, it's in the name. But the tour explicitly breaks down how the Spanish colonial influence, the French colonial roots, and the American river trade all sit right on top of each other.
And that brings up one of my absolute favorite historical details that I really hope they cover on this route.
Yeah.
The French Quarter is mostly Spanish architecture.
It's the ultimate irony.
It totally is. And the reason why is entirely catastrophic. So in the late 1700s, there were two massive fires, one in 1788 and another in 1794. And the original French colonial city, which was mostly built out of wood, basically burned to the ground.
It was completely decimated. And the Spanish were in control of the city at that time, right?
Yeah.
So they were the ones who had to rebuild it. They looked at the ashes and essentially instituted strict new building codes. No more exposed wood anywhere.
Makes sense after two massive fires.
Exactly. Everything had to be brick, and it had to be covered in stucco to protect from the dampness. And they mandated slate or tile roofs to prevent flying embers from catching during the next fire.
So when people are walking around today admiring the quaint, historic vibe of the French Quarter, they are actually admiring an 18th century disaster response plan.
That's exactly what it is.
The whole aesthetic is just a byproduct of panic and fire prevention. I mean, that is the kind of context that makes a walking tour so valuable. It's like reading the table of contents before diving into a massive, complicated novel.
That's a great way to put it.
Because if you just jump to chapter 20 of a sprawling epic, you're going to be totally lost. You need the geographic and historical bearings first.
And that table of contents metaphor is vital here, because once you understand the grand public layers around Jackson Square, the tour intentionally shifts its focus. It moves away from the wide-open civic spaces and takes you down Royal Street, weaving toward places like the old Ursuline convent.
Okay, so it gets a bit more intimate.
Exactly. The narrative pivots from the public empire to the intimate, private lives of the actual people who live there.
Now, the shift into the private, intimate spaces brings up a massive detail that is kind of buried in the fine print of the sources. And it's something any prospective traveler needs to know before they drop $48 on a ticket.
Oh, the exterior stops.
Yes. The sources explicitly state this is a city history experience with exterior stops and storytelling. There are no guaranteed interior admissions. So I have to ask, if we aren't going inside these gorgeous historic homes or convents, are we just paying to stand on the sidewalk and stare at brick walls for an hour and 45 minutes?
It sounds totally counterintuitive, I know. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the exterior actually is the core curriculum of this tour.
Wait, really? The outside is the point?
Yes. The narrative specifically focuses on how private interiors in New Orleans intentionally hide behind public facades. The architecture itself was designed as a defense mechanism, and not just against fire, but against the harsh environment and the public gaze.
Okay, unpack the mechanism there. How is a brick wall acting as a defense against the environment?
Well, think about those Spanish building codes we just discussed. They built these fortress-like outer walls that push right up to the very edge of the sidewalk.
Right, there's no front lawn.
Exactly. But behind those imposing walls, they built these lush, shaded, open-air courtyards. And in an era way before air conditioning, when they were dealing with brutal, swampy heat and rampant diseases like yellow fever, those courtyards were basically an ancient HVAC system.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. The dense outer walls blocked the sun and the chaos of the street. Meanwhile, the inner courtyard acted as the lungs of the property, pulling cool air up and drawing it through the living spaces.
So the fact that you can't see inside isn't a limitation of the tour. It is the literal subject matter.
Exactly.
The wall was built to keep you out. So you are standing exactly where the history happened. On the street, looking at the boundaries people built to protect themselves from the climate, and honestly, from each other.
The street becomes the canvas for the story, and that ties directly into the literary history the tour weaves into. The sources highlight that the guides discuss literary giants like Tennessee Williams and William Faulkner, who both lived in the quarter.
Oh, Faulkner. He famously wrote his first novel while living in a ground-floor apartment hidden away in Pirates Alley, which is just off Jackson Square.
And that is the connection right there. These writers were observers. They lived in those shielded private spaces, the courtyards, the hidden balconies, and they just watched the magnificent, maddening public life of New Orleans parade past their closed gates.
So it's all about that boundary.
Right. The tension between the heavily guarded private reality and the chaotic public face of the city is what fueled so much of their art. So by standing on the exterior, looking at those facades, the tour puts you in the exact same observational mindset as those famous authors.
Man, that completely flips my perspective on an exterior-only experience. It's not a ripoff. It's giving you the tools to notice the intentional secrecy of the city. But that brings us to a major logistical hurdle. If this tour is so thoughtful, so focused on ancient HVAC systems and literary ghosts, how on earth does it survive in a wild, predatory ecosystem of New Orleans tourism?
Because the competition down there is notoriously fierce.
Fierce doesn't even cover it. Here's where it gets really interesting. Looking at the TripAdvisor source, under their similar experiences in top-rated sections, it is an absolute circus.
Oh, I can only imagine.
To compete for your time and money, Quarter Notes is up against an adults-only true crime and ghost walking tour. There's a premier ghost, voodoo, and vampire walking tour.
Of course there is.
You can go on a swamp zipline adventure, take a high-speed airboat ride, or sign up for a literal voodoo doll-making class.
A voodoo doll-making class?
Yes. So when a tourist arrives with limited time, how does a 105-minute architectural stroll compete with a swamp zipline or, hunting vampires?
It's a great question. And it survives by recognizing that it serves a completely different function in a traveler's diet. The source material doesn't try to compete with the spectacle. It explicitly positions Quarter Notes as the optimal first New Orleans tour. It is the foundation you build the rest of your trip upon.
That makes a lot of sense. Because taking one of those vampire tours before you understand the colonial history of New Orleans, it's like watching a horror movie with the sound completely muted.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to phrase it.
Right. Like you see the jump scares, you see the blood, but you don't feel the tension building up. You have no idea why the monster is actually scary.
The haunted pub crawls and the true crime walks are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but they are the dessert of the New Orleans experience. And if you only eat dessert, you end up with a sugar crash and no real substance.
You need the protein first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The literary references, the Spanish fire codes, the deep influence of the Mississippi River trade that brought enslaved people, pirates, and aristocrats all to the exact same muddy banks. That history is the soil the spooky stuff grows in.
Wow, yeah. Without that soil, a ghost story is just a cheap thrill. But if you know that the courtyard you're looking at was built to quarantine a family during a horrific yellow fever epidemic, well, suddenly, the ghost story about the haunted balcony carries genuine historical resonance.
It hits totally different.
It does. This tour provides the soundtrack that gives the rest of your vacation its actual meaning.
It creates the context. The sources emphasize using this walk as the anchor before you return to the themed experiences or the jazz clubs or the World War II museum. It teaches you the vocabulary of the city so you can actually read it for the rest of your stay.
All right, because this deep dive is all about being practical scouts for our listeners, we need to talk about the physical realities of the tour. We've established the philosophy, we love the route, but let's look at the logistics, the quirks, and the fine print.
Let's do it.
If you are actually going to book this right now, what do you need to know?
The most immediate detail that jumps out is the group size. The Excursion Pass listing notes there's a strict maximum of 16 travelers per group.
Oh, wow. Which is incredibly rare.
It really is.
Usually you see a guide walking backward holding a brightly colored umbrella, shouting through a crackly portable microphone, and dragging like 50 exhausted people behind them.
It's miserable, but capping it at 16 allows for an actual conversation. It aligns perfectly with their connection over consumption mandate. You can't practice the power of presence if you're straining to hear someone over a megaphone.
And I imagine it also helps with just physically walking around.
Oh, absolutely. It allows you to actually navigate the sidewalks, which in the French Quarter are incredibly narrow and often packed with people.
And speaking of navigating those sidewalks, my absolute favorite detail from the requirements section is their strict warning about footwear. The listing explicitly states, please wear soft-soled shoes, no high heels or flimsy sandals.
They are not messing around with that.
They are completely serious. And having walked those streets myself, I understand exactly why.
Yeah, you are navigating 18th and 19th century infrastructure. The pavement is this chaotic mix of uneven flagstone, warped brick, exposed tree roots, and cobblestone.
It's an ankle-twisting nightmare.
It is. These are not smooth, modern mall concourses. If you try to walk 2 miles in stilettos or cheap flip-flops, your tour is going to end at an orthopedic clinic.
It's the physical reality of a historic city. But, in reading through all these detailed logistical listings, I did catch a glaring contradiction across the sources.
Oh, what did you find?
It's regarding who this tour is actually for. So TripAdvisor categorizes the Quarter Notes tour under ages 18-99.
Okay, adults only.
Right. But simultaneously, right underneath that age restriction, it lists the tour as stroller accessible and dictates that infants must sit on laps.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And meanwhile, the ExcursionPass source proudly calls it an all-ages introduction to the city's most famous neighborhood. So which is it? Are infants sitting on laps while the guide checks their 18 and over ID? What's going on here?
This raises an important question, and it's a classic example of booking algorithms forcing nuanced custom experiences into rigid automated checkboxes.
It drives me crazy when I'm planning a trip. You literally have no idea which tag to trust.
I know, but the reality requires looking at the actual route and the subject matter. So the physical route, starting at Jackson Square, moving down Royal Street and cruising along the Moonwalk by the river, is flat, paved, and generally devoid of stairs.
So a stroller could physically make it.
Exactly. Therefore, the stroller accessible and wheelchair accessible tags are physically accurate. The infrastructure can handle it.
But the intellectual route is heavily focused on Spanish colonial building codes, William Faulkner, and the structural tension between public and private spaces.
Exactly. The ages 1899 tag is likely just a default setting the provider checked to signal that this is an adult-focused narrative. It's an hour and 45 minutes of history, architecture, and storytelling. It doesn't rely on jump scares or interactive games to keep children entertained.
So, while the pavement can handle a stroller, your toddler's attention span probably cannot handle a deep dive into 18th century municipal fire codes.
Probably not.
If you are a listener planning a family trip, this is definitely something to weigh carefully. Luckily, the sources do provide a safety net.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they list a dedicated accessibility phone number. It's 1-855-275-5071. And they even give a specific reference code for the tour, which is 559-4004P1. We always recommend giving them a quick call if you have any doubts about bringing young kids or, navigating mobility devices.
That is great advice. It is always better to clarify the vibe of the tour than to show up and realize you're spending 2 hours managing a toddler meltdown while the guide is trying to talk about Tennessee Williams.
A truly terrible combination.
It really is.
Yeah.
But overall, considering the $48 price point, the logistics paint a picture of a highly accessible, intimate, and thoughtfully structured experience.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring all these threads together. For roughly the price of 3 oversized novelty cocktails on Bourbon Street, the Quarter Notes tour offers you something far more durable.
Much more durable.
It gives you the geographical and historical anchor you need to actually see the city. By choosing connection over consumption on your very first morning, you basically equip yourself with the architectural and cultural vocabulary to understand the magnificent, messy layers of the French Quarter.
It's the table of contents to your New Orleans vacation.
Exactly. Turning you from a passive consumer of a theme park into an active reader of a living, breathing historical text.
It fundamentally changes your posture as a traveler. You aren't just letting the city happen to you, you are actively engaging with its secrets.
And speaking of secrets, we always want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends, something to carry with you on your own travels.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time today exploring how the French Quarter was literally designed to hide its true self. The courtyards, the inner lives, the true heartbeat of the city were intentionally walled off behind heavy public facades for protection.
Hidden in plain sight.
Right, and this tour teaches you to look at those exterior brick walls not as barriers, but as the canvas of the story itself. It leaves you wondering, if the true history of a city is intentionally hidden in plain sight, just behind a locked iron gate or a stucco wall, how much of the places we visit do we actually see?
That's a profound question.
And how much of our travel is just walking past history, completely unaware that it's even there?